can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Hi everybody and welcome back to the Tuesday Twilight show with me, Timea, on Teachers Talk Radio. In this show, every second Tuesday from 6 p.m., we talk about a hot topic in higher education. And today's topic couldn't be hotter, and this is authentic assessment. With the need of helping students get employability skills during their studies and be able to start right away after the university in the world of work. Obviously, there's also a need to probably rethink how we assess students and what kind of tasks they have to do. What are the projects? How do we rethink assessments? And this will be our topic today. Well, at the same time, with the evolution of generative AI that students now use, and we should really help them use it for the right reasons and the right way, and in an authentic and in a very ethical way, that again adds to the questions of how we rethink assessments. So these are the topics that we'll talk about today with my two brilliant guests that I will invite to the stage in a second. But before that, I would like to introduce to you John Catt's bookshop and the discount they give. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, the publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. You can level up your professional development if you visit this website you can see on the screen, johncattsbookshop.com, and you can explore the full range of titles. There are also books about assessment and student engagement. You can use this code you can see on the screen, JCTTR 2425 for 20% discount. And please visit this show. Visit this website. And now I would like to invite to the stage my two fantastic guests, Dr. Kevin Campbell-Karn. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for coming to the show. Hello.
Hi, Timea.
And Kevin is an associate professor at Buckinghamshire University and delivers talks all over the UK and the world on AI assessments and many other topics. I was very lucky to be at one of his talks, and I still remember many golden nuggets that he shared there. So I'm very, very happy to have you here, Kevin, today. And my other fantastic guest today is Dr. Tom Ritchie. Hello, Tom. Thank you very much for being here with us. And Tom is the Director of Student Engagement at University of Warwick and also a US-UK Fulbright Scholar. And we could obviously talk about many topics, but today I invited Tom to talk about authentic assessments. Thank you, everybody who joined us live on any of our social channels, and please join the conversation. So please comment, ask questions, or share your opinion, share your ideas. We're absolutely here to make it a conversation and not just a presentation. Okay, so I'd like to start with probably defining or talking a bit about what authentic assessment is. Where does it start? What are the assessments where we can say they are authentic? And you can bring examples of authentic and non-authentic assessments, but let's just start a little bit probably with a kind of, it doesn't have to be a clear definition, but just talking through what both of you think about this. I don't know, Kevin, if or any of you, and then please just go on. You don't have to wait for me to ask you.
Yeah, I think for me, it really starts back with when I was a student, and in my studies, I had a variety of assessments, as many students do, And the assessment that really stood out for me, and what I was studying was sports therapy at the time, and it was a very practically based course, but we had a variety of assessments. It could be exam based, it could be coursework. We had portfolios, we had placements that we were on, and but quite a few of them were then the practicals. And I seemed to excel much more in the doing and showing and explaining, and being able to take information and apply it to the setting and to a patient, versus going into a scenario and someone saying, can you recall this list of contraindications to that treatment that you've got to do? And I'd think, oh, how am I going to remember this pattern of what I've got to relay and be able to say back to someone? So for me, it always comes back from what I've experienced, and it therefore comes back to the validity really around what we're assessing the students for, and how that relates directly to what they want to do in the future as to why they're studying that course. So being able to understand, what are they trying to learn, what are the outcomes that they want to achieve from that, and how will that best be applied in their future practice.
Okay, so it has to be somehow related to practice. That is, we can say that is part of it. That is what makes it authentic, right?
Yeah,
not just simply recalling something that we already learned and then giving it back. Okay, good. That's a good point. Thanks you, Kevin. Tom, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, similar, I think, to Kevin. My background is in history, so I'm actually quite good at learning lists of facts and then recalling them. That was my bag for kind of 3 years at undergrad, is learning how to put those into essays. But I now work in a chemistry department, and so it's a very different space to even consider what assessments are. And the last time I did chemistry was at AS level, so 100 years ago. And so I'm not there. I don't understand always why we assess the way we do in the department. And actually, I'm in a very lucky position to be able to ask why. Why do we do it this way? Why do we assess 100% exams in so many modules when actually we know that for many of our students, that may not work? And I think COVID itself was a really interesting example, because we had lots of students. We had open book exams. We had slightly different approaches because we had to. And it showed, I think, not just at Warwick, but where I worked previously as well, it showed that there are other ways of doing this beyond just, can you recall this thing and tell me what it was? I think my experience at Warwick has been quite interesting from the point of view of, a lot of my work is based around student partnership. And so I work, whether it's in the student experience side of things or in teaching, around how do we create space for students to test and develop ideas, and so therefore test and develop themselves and grow and navigate failure and all of the things linked to design thinking and things like that. And so for me, I think one of the key aspects of authentic assessment for me is that you work with students as learners to help them design their own assessments, their own modules, and actually understand what matters to them. And so you mentioned employability, and again, chemistry, I think at Warwick is an interesting example where 4/5 of our students don't go into chemistry. So we have to think about, how do we assess them in meaningful ways that prepare them, give them skills, and allow them to articulate that when they go into jobs, or when they're going into graduate schemes, or whatever else it is they choose to go into. And so I think a key element for me, and something I'll probably speak a little bit more about, is that partnership with students that goes beyond perhaps just consultation. I think it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we worked with students, when you just maybe sent them a questionnaire, but actually getting them in the room and saying, okay, here's the learning outcomes. What is the type of assessment that we can develop in this space? What would be interesting? What would allow you to express yourself, to develop your ideas, and really make it meaningful? I think, like Kevin said, in your experience in a hospital context, it's much easier when you're dealing with real life things, because you can apply knowledge to it rather than abstract how many X in Y in this question, which I think can be a real challenge for the majority of learners. And I think if we're not reflecting the learners that we have coming in, then we're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very good. And I would like to go back to it, how we involve students into developing it, definitely. And thank you for the points that you raised. My background is in marketing. And obviously, when I was teaching digital marketing, very much, obviously, assessment is like actually do a campaign or something around that. But just getting, and also employability, actually creating a project which you can probably put on a portfolio. I think that's also very interesting, that when you work on it for a semester and you learn about it for a semester, you create something that you can say that even if you never had any kind of job, You can go to an interview and say that, look, we developed these campaigns and we had this kind of, I don't know, feedback or this kind of work. But let me ask this question a little bit, the devil's advocate now, that are essays then not authentic anymore, or a report? Because if you think about it, in terms of employability, yes, we can obviously always turn to AI to explain us things, but eventually when we will be at a workplace and we have to present about something, or we have to write a lot of reports, and if we want to do it in a meaningful way, even if we use AI for that, it's still a skill, it's still important. If you write an essay, it's a lot of reflection, or how to do the literature review, how we research and things. So would you still say that it can be part of authentic assessment, or it's not anymore authentic, or it's just not authentic because it's very hard to figure out, to look at the academic misconduct and the AI part of it? Or why suddenly yes, obviously we should not have essays in all the, or exams in all the modules, but does it really mean that we completely move away from these kind of assessment types?
I mean, for me, I don't think that you can disregard any single assessment type, and but I think it is about the exploration of what is the most appropriate assessment for the given task. And actually, coming back to Tom's point as well about talking about, with these learning outcomes, what's the assessment we might want to do? There's a bit before that of, are the learning outcomes right, and do we need to review the learning outcome? Because really, what do we need at the end of that? Come back to your point, Tom, on sort of the transferable skills of chemistry, if they're not all going to become chemists in some way. So, what's the transferable skill? What's the direct skill that might relate into a specific profession? But then how can we extract that and put it somewhere else? Going slightly off topic for what you asked, Timea, so my apologies. But coming back,
that's very interesting. No, do you have an example actually when you found out that it was not the right learning outcome and it was good to change?
Plenty of times, yeah. I think because I think quite often when we're looking at how we're going to assess a student, we're trying to review what they've learned and how they've applied it. We can sometimes get lost in our own nuance of what our learning outcomes were, and we may have inherited a module, or we may have inherited a course even. Someone comes in and they get, this is the module, this is the course they want to do, or they may be asked to redesign it. But there's two things. There's a nervousness to redesign something that they perceive might already be working quite well. So it's a challenge to make something new and say, no, I'm going to start again. I'm going to kind of etch a sketch, reset, and design something fresh. But then also, what experience have they had of doing that, and are they prepared to say, well, I'm a very experienced practitioner, clinician, I know what the end product is, but I haven't actually learned what the steps are to get someone to do what I've learned how to do. And then there's also the point around, well, if I learned it that way and I was tested that way, everyone else should be tested that way, which is kind of that traditionalist method, which I think is quite rightly being questioned a lot with this kind of authentic assessment discussion of saying, well, I had exams, so why can't you? And it's not a case of saying, no, you shouldn't have exams. It's for all of us to be questioning, is that the most appropriate form of assessment? And if it is deemed the most appropriate form of assessment, it might be one of an appropriate form of assessments. And so, for you, Tom, if there are things that you need to learn that list, is that because in that given scenario, I need to be able to just recall what that list of items were and how I can then use that and apply that knowledge to a given task, a given function, a given output, whatever it is. And if that's the case, it may well be that you do need to show that you have learned those specific lists. Within my area, that would be anatomy, for example. If I don't know the anatomy, I cannot apply knowledge about how to treat something that's broken or something that needs fixing in some sort of way. So there is an absolute requirement that anatomy is understood. But is an exam the most appropriate way of testing that knowledge? It's something we've done a lot of, but is it the most appropriate? Or actually, could I have a box of bones and pull a bone out and hand it to someone and say, what's that? Work it out, not look at a picture in an exam hall with everyone there and then label it. Actually, let me hand it to you, and it's the same question, what's that bone? But now they can feel it, they can touch it, they can experience it, and it's three-dimensional all of a sudden. That to me has a lot more authenticity than looking at a picture, because I would hope that they're going to see real people and see their bones, not necessarily fully stripped off, but they will have access to that body and need to understand it. Or maybe they're looking at imagery, in which case, here's an image, what are the bones? So it's sort of, you're trying to then make it be more applicable in that scenario.
Okay.
I think I really like the point, Kevin. I think to kind of come back to what you were saying, some of the things, and again, I'm going to use the chemistry example. We have accreditation from the Royal Society for Chemistry. So there are certain things we have to teach. There are certain skills we have to teach. And I do take your point of, okay, if you have to teach them, is that the best way of doing it? And I think that's a question that we ask quite a lot, particularly in the midst of a curriculum review and trying to understand how do we do this in a more, not interesting way, but to your point of, well, I did exams and it didn't hurt me, so you should do it. I think I reflect on a lot is that, and this might be a slightly larger challenge with higher education as a space, the people who design what we learn are people that have succeeded through the system. So you get elements of survivorship bias where not all of my colleagues, but a number of them are very, very keen to get more PhD students. And whilst they want to teach and be excellent teachers, I know deep down that may be at the core. And so the skills that they're teaching are to create more versions of themselves, which is fine.
A funnel of what they want.
Exactly. Yeah. And as a result, I think that's fine, but we have to be aware of the 4 in 5 who don't go into chemistry in that context. And that can be a real challenge. I think, Timea, on your question about essays, just to pick on that as an example, as someone who's, again, written quite a few essays in my life at different points, I think, and this came from a conversation I had the other day with a colleague from Stirling University, I think there are some types of essays that if we start to think about the potentials and risks of AI are becoming less perhaps useful as a way of measuring student knowledge, student skills, student application. So if I think about a compare and contrast essay, it used to be that I would go and sit in the library for a few weeks, read lots of different books, synthesize ideas, try to understand arguments, counter arguments, and come back and forth. AI can do that now so much quicker than I can, that actually, and yes, there's hallucinations, yes, there's problems, and we'll get to bias and issues of that in a second, but AI can, at least on the face of it, do a lot of that work. So we need to think about, if we're giving students essays, is that the right type of essay? Or do we instead want to think, okay, take a step back, AI literacy is a very important skill. So why don't we actually teach students how to effectively use AI, how to be able to be critical of it, how to, one of the things that we've tried to do with students is we encourage them to use AI to write, not necessarily an essay, but to answer a question. And then they mark what the AI has said and say, is this correct? Is this what you would put if you were in this space? What's missing? Where would you add your value as the human in the loop? And I think that for me is a semi-answer, I think, to your question. And we're bringing the AI point in quite early, which I appreciate we maybe didn't get to do. But I know that
we can. We're free.
Yeah. And Kevin, I know obviously you've done similar work around AI and assessment, so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. But this, how we frame perhaps essays as the purpose of this question in how we're using AI and how we're effectively teaching students to use that, I think is perhaps a bigger thing to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this approach because actually we have to write, and we know from recruiters, we know from the industry hiring managers that candidates cannot write a report, cannot write a cover letter, or just send in a cover letter which is too general and you see it's AI because they didn't even reflect. The cover letter is a reflection of what you've achieved and what you want to achieve. And yes, you can ask AI to give you some tips on it, but actually you have to do the reflection. even if you later on get proofreading from the AI. And I think this is a fantastic way of, okay, let's get something that is written or an essay, but then show how you actually reflected on it. What was your critical thinking on going back? Because this is exactly how we should use AI, how we use AI. Otherwise, it's going to be a bunch of what we can see today. As if you're a hiring manager, you will see that it has become even worse with these cover letters and CVs and any type of written. This is what people at companies are doing now with these reports, are all generate. There's a joke around it that you ask AI to generate a report, send it to someone who will ask it to summarize it, and then it becomes all just one, general thing. So I really, really agree with that completely. Removing essay or any kind of written thing is, as much as I'm really in favor of the practitioner aspect, as you can imagine, and it's probably not the right thing to do. But and we'll give it to Kevin. I know that he has a lot to say about it as well. But I also like your point, and I just don't want to miss this thought, Tom, the excitement. Then assessment should be exciting. And I love it when the whole semester everybody is excited to work on it. And it's not like, oh my God, no, what is it? I'm scared. It's boring. Not again, but it's something that I love coming back to and having that experience of working on something which is exciting and having that feeling of achievement when just by doing it, not even having a mark on it. Because this is what keeps us going in life, not only the achievements and feedback, but also what we've done and accomplished. And an exciting assessment can just do that. And you will not have the feeling of achievement if it was done purely by AI, because then you didn't do it. So it takes away such an important thing in life from you, that feeling of accomplishment, that I've done it. It was so hard, but I did it. And I think that is what a good assessment does, right? That's probably a very important part of it.
And I think, just to jump in, Kevin, before we start talking about AI, I think, Timea, on that point, I'm with you on the excitement. And I think universities and the way that students are approaching university through absolutely no fault of their own is so instrumental now compared to even 10, 15, 20 years ago when I went to university. And I completely get why. You're paying so much money, you want to get a first. You can't afford to fail, for want of a better term. And so I have lots of questions from students of, how do I get a first? It's not, how do I understand this better? It's, how do I get a first? And I completely get where that comes from. And so I think if you can shape assessments into something that people want to do rather than loathe, and also make it meaningful, make it part of what you're learning, what you're teaching. And so it's not, you're going to learn something for 5 weeks or 10 weeks, and then completely separately, we're going to throw something at you at the end that isn't perhaps linked to that. You almost want to integrate the assessment throughout. And some of the ways that I teach, and I can talk more about it a little bit later on, is we try to almost set up the skills that students are going to need in the final assessment throughout the module, whether it's in weekly reflections or weekly tasks. And so it's not the first time they've come to it. And by doing it that way, when students maybe week to week are like, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? Why have you asked me to use AI in this way? But then when they get to the end, it all crystallizes. And I think people then realize, okay, everything we've been learning now makes sense. And we can now apply it, which, again, if we come back to what is meaningful assessment to you, mine is, can you apply what you've learned in a meaningful way? But they can apply it in a concrete, non-abstract, useful way. I think that for me is key. If I look at all my modules I teach, that an element of that, I hope, is in all of them for students, that they get to the end and go, that was actually quite interesting, and I've got something I can take away from it, rather than, thank God that's done, I can forget that now and move on to the
That's the worst. Yeah. So Kevin, please. Also, we mentioned AI in an essay, or anything you'd like to add to it. I'm just putting down notes where I would like to come back to later, so that we don't forget.
So yeah, I think just sort of listening to those points, it sort of fits really neatly with a piece that I'm working on with Associate Professor Lynn Gribble in Australia, where we're really looking at the idea of, and it's kind of encompassing of AI and assessments and higher education. But I think it really fits in with all the points you've just been discussing there, and it's around confidence. So if you have say it's writing a report, which let's make the transference between a report is like an essay. So we teach about essays, we assess in essays because in a given situation scenario of your workplace, you may be required, and it's quite likely you will be required to write a report or report on something at some stage. Why do people turn to AI to write that report for them? And to me, there's two clear indicators. One is they want a shortcut. We're humans. All humans want a shortcut. I've said this quite a few times. I take my son to school in the morning. I get to school. I say goodbye to him. He shuts the door, and then I get my phone out, and I'm there for 20 more seconds outside the school because I check the route from school to work because I want to know which way is going to be the quickest for me that morning. Because sometimes there's roadwork, sometimes there's traffic, sometimes there's been an accident or whatever it is, and I'll go the quickest way because that's easier for me. And that's what all of these systems, tools, everything that we're using are for, is to make our lives easier, and because we want a shortcut. And AI can offer that shortcut. And the sort of it's both a worry, but also I can understand it. Is that without confidence in doing something, you're going to go for the shortcut in a situation where you probably shouldn't. Like, could you answer this essay question for me? Because I'm not confident in what I've learned and that I can apply what I've learned in the way that Tom wants, or that Kevin wants, or that Timea wants, to be able to assess that I've achieved what I want to achieve. Coming to your point, Tom, around how do I pass the assessment, not how do I engage most of all to be able to be the best, whatever it is, practitioner or chemist or whatever in a given situation. And so a lot of what we need to be reflecting on in that is both through that authenticity of our assessment and also the authenticity of our teaching and learning activities, is how to give them the confidence. And we are in a world where people are likely to say, I'm not confident or comfortable doing that, and I want an alternative. And sometimes it's tough and it is hard, and it's how we can enable someone to get that confidence back, to say, as I can do that, whatever it is. But again, it's back on us as academics to look at, so how can we explore that in a way that builds? And Tom, your point there around building those, if it's a reflection piece that they've got to do as part of their assessment, make them reflect all of the time. Build their confidence in reflective activities throughout their whole process, because that's what keys them in. And why not be working on the actual assessment during some of those sessions, so they can be gaining feedback and feeling more confident in what they've done, how they've done it, and that therefore I'm on the right track. That's why they want to, could you have a look at my draft? Why do they want that? I want to feel confident that I'm going down the right path. I know it needs to be my work, but I just want confirmation from you that I'm in the right, in going in the right direction, and that this is going to help me. And with AI, of course, they can ask it anything. And there's a non-judgmental thing on the other side of that, rather than a human that they might feel less confident to come and ask that question of. And of course, that then can lead to the question of, well, okay, well, do it for me then, because I don't have the confidence to do it myself. And that's where we can get into crossing that line around academic integrity. And a lot of that, I think, still also comes down to then the learning environment and ensuring that students are also confident in what they can and should ask of artificial intelligence to support them in that journey, and where they need to then sit in learning and applying that knowledge themselves. And again, Tom, that point you made around assessing the output that AI has generated is, that's like rule 101, isn't it? Can you analyze the quality of an output that has come from AI? The only way you can do that about a given topic is if you understand it. It's perfect. It's the perfect way of using it. Get it to give it to you. Tell me if it's right. That's what a fantastic way of learning. And all of a sudden you go, doesn't that be a useful way of assessing, potentially?
Yeah, and I think the point about confidence as well, Kevin, I really like. I was nodding and I was scribbling away as you were talking. And confidence in assessment, I think, for me at least, means we have to perhaps not talk about authentic assessments, but talk about authentic curriculum, and actually thinking about how do we not treat students as brains in jars? How do we treat them as whole people with hopes, dreams, expectations, part-time jobs for 60
limitations
of them, or whatever it is, right? And as people who are scared and are trying their best. And I think for me, the way I've tried to do that is really, I've trained as a professional coach so that I can actually coach my students, and that's built into the curriculum. So students, whenever they want on modules, can just book a 15-minute catch up with me for really simple coaching tools, just to be like, not why are you doing this, but like, how can I, it's the grow model essentially, but how can we give you confidence here? How do we give you the will to take action and not feel like you are stuck because you're 6 weeks into a degree that you perhaps weren't sure about? And how can we help you get past that initial stumbling block or the lack of confidence? And I think I mentioned about student partnership earlier. So for a year one module that I teach, wanting to have that authenticity in the design of the module and the curriculum, we didn't just speak to our students. We actually spoke to secondary school teachers and college teachers and said, okay, where are they when they leave you? And then we reflected, where do we need them to be at the end of year one? And then we're going to design basically a skills module that bridges that gap. So we'll do it with the students in year 2, year 3 who say, do you know what, we wish we'd learn more of this. We'll do it with the people who are teaching the students up to the point they come to us and say, where are they? Where is their confidence? Where's their skill set? And there was an authenticity in that we can actually say, we're not just teaching you these skills because we think it's important, but people who've sat in your chairs before have told us, and the people that taught you have told us that these are important. I think there's sometimes an emphasis that we firewall academic components of a degree away from everything else. So extracurricular is over there, pastoral is over there, academic is the one. And I struggle with that because I think my role is designed to sit in that third space between academic, professional services, student experience, all of that. And so I'm always really keen to try to integrate the curriculum to make it, again, authentic. So when we're talking about different, so the example I'll give is when we talk about different skills on a module or things we're learning, I'm very conscious that I'm one person who they might be listening to in a lecture or in a seminar or whatever else. And so every module I teach, I try to have content from industry. And so have people from outside. So if I'm going to talk, let's say, about project management to our year one students, when we're trying to teach them about, okay, you need to think about how they've never been taught it before. So we're going to teach you how to do it and not just assume you can. I'll tell them about it. I'll tell them about Agile and about Waterfall. Great. They can learn that. They can think about, how do I apply this in the group project that we're working on? But then in that week as well, I also have someone who comes from Google and talks about it from their context and says, okay, this is why project management matters for us in industry. When we do public speaking, I have someone from the European Union who trains politicians to speak publicly to come and say, this is why it's important. And the hope is with that, and then get students to reflect on those conversations as well. So it's not just passively listening. They have to reflect and go, what did you learn? What surprised you? How has it changed your mind? What would you share with others now from what you've heard? And the point of all of that is it increases that level of authenticity again. So it's not just we're teaching you skills for the sake of it. It's here's the skills, here's the real world application. Now reflect on what you think of this. And your point about get them to do reflection each week before you then ask them to reflect at the end is exactly what we try to do, particularly with reflection, because scientists don't love to reflect, is my experience of the last couple of years. They really push back against it compared to people in humanities. And I think that for me is I realize we stepped slightly away from assessment, but that authentic curriculum piece is really important, because if
I love that expression, authentic curriculum.
Because I think if students don't, I don't want to get too much onto the belonging side of things as well, but
no, you can, please.
But if students don't have that confidence, if they don't feel like they belong, if they don't feel like they matter in the curriculum, then what's the point? We spoke about being instrumental. If we want students to stop that, we have to give them more than just come and get your degree, come and get a first because you need to get it for your job. I think if I think about the assessments itself, to kind of bring it back to what we're talking about, the way I work on it with a colleague in the AI module we teach is we challenge students with wicked problems. We actually give them problems that they can't fix by using AI. So
like what? What is an example?
How do you fix global warming? throw that problem at them in week one.
Yeah, I cannot fix that. I thought it could.
You know what I mean? Like, it's one of the bigger causes. But we will ask them these questions, these wicked problems that don't have a single solution, and it encourages them to have to think beyond just being a chemist or just being a computer scientist, and actually think, well, here's what my discipline allows me to bring, but I have to work with others. I have to be able to see, I have to understand how a historian thinks about moral panics in relation to technology, to understand if I'm going to create a future that resolves this problem, that resolves this wicked problem, how can I bring all these different viewpoints in? And that, I think that interdisciplinarity for me is what leads to, through the assessments we do, really interesting synthesis of ideas. So to give a practical example, and I'm going to give a shout out to my colleague, Dr. Jenny Mills, who is my co-lead on this module. We get them to do a policy brief partway through the module. It's a policy brief for the UK government on an AI-enabled sustainable development goal. So pick one, write your policy brief on it. We give them the outline. They can use AI. It's entirely AI-enabled. We then, for the final assessment, having gone through all the weeks that we do, we say to them, okay, now we want you to basically engage in something called speculative futures. So this is something that AI can help with but can't do. So we want you to imagine an AI-enabled world in 2040, linked to one specific sustainable development goal, and now build the world. Build it how you want. Tell us about it. And so we had students who were using AI to help them develop interviews from people in different perspectives, from the global north, global south, about what's the impact of AI around quality education. We had students writing pick your own adventure books. So a student from computer science who had never written an essay before wrote some sort of 30, 40,000 word pick your own adventure book. It was incredible. And it was, I hope, because we were saying to them, do something that you're interested in and synthesize all these ideas. And there's such a fear, I think, sometimes around, and I realize I'm jumping around a bit, but there's such a fear, I think, sometimes around using AI. And there's a project I'm working on with colleagues at Monash University, clearly a link with Australians who we work with there, Kevin, where we're using custom GPTs in chemistry, and we're designing them to help students learn new skills. And the one that we've been working on is around Viva presentations, to help students develop their skill set, because we don't have resource to sit with every single student and practice Vivas. So they can do it with an AI chatbot that we've built. And we saw through using that, and colleagues at Monash found that something like 95% of students on the module used it. 85% of the 90% found it really useful. But what it meant was actually they could lift the assessment criteria, because actually the lower skills were now being done much more quickly, and students had them. So students were they're actually doing better, but they could lift the grade boundaries, because they were seeing that AI enablement in this space was helping students test, build confidence, be able to come at things from a slightly different way. So I realize there's lots of points in there, and I apologize because it was probably a bit of a word salad.
Oh, don't apologize. Amazing thought. Thank you.
It's trying to just, think about these things in a more authentic way, from curriculum to assessment to how we're actually trying to get students to use AI beyond just going on ChatGPT and typing in, can you write this essay for me? And I think we underdo that. So,
Yeah, no, thank you for absolutely jumping around. And I will come back to you, Kevin. Just before that, I would like to draw everybody's attention to our newsletter, Teacher Talks Radio newsletter, which you can sign up on the ttradio.org/newsletter. It is sent to 15,000 educators every week, and you get a curated selection of 4 standout shows into your mailbox. And we also have a comment or a question from the audience, and we will come to it. It's from Inka. But Tom mentioned so many great points that on one point, I'd like to ask Kevin, because one thing that I remember from that talk that you delivered was exactly about this, that assessment should not only be about the outcome and only test about what students learn, but how they learned and actually see it. And that was, I think, a very good point from your talk. If you could elaborate on that, and then I will come to you, Inka, with the question that you put into the comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's been a real passion of mine, and AI has kind of really brought it to the forefront, because if we take the essay, I know we've sort of badgered quite a lot around the essay, but it applies to most assessments really as well, you know, an exam even especially. And if we take a module, it might be a 10-week, 12-week, 15-week, even 30-week module. We kind of we have this linear approach of, right, where you start the module, we explain what we're doing, and then we will go through this process, and we will start here and we will end over here, and in that journey you'll learn. And then at the end, we will ask you either a series of questions, which might be your exam style, or you're going to submit your coursework because you've achieved your learning. And that thing at the end, that product that you've produced at the end, is our verification that you have learned what it was we wanted you to learn. And that's then our learning outcomes. And the point that I made in that talk, and I've kind of referred to it several times in a few different talks that I've given, is that if we only assess that end point, we're missing the richness that happened in between. And I think it will link in quite nicely to one of the points that Inka's made there around about being able to a safe place to experiment and fail. And where else do we learn best than if we're failing? And so the point that I was posing, or the question that I was posing within that talk, was, what if we could assess the process of learning, not just the product at the end? I'm not suggesting we don't have a product that is the final kind of incarnation of the combination of all of that learning. But if we could assess the process of learning as they get from the very beginning of a module through to the end, and that's kind of why we have a modular system as well now, is because we're trying to take some data points in the journey of the beginning of the degree to the end of the degree. But I was kind of, I kind of asked the question a little bit more about, could we not assess that process of learning, of that journey of delivery throughout the module? And if it's something that is including, if we're including, excuse me, something like artificial intelligence, then how they build. I think the talk was especially focused around academic integrity and the concerns of AI within that space, because you get this product at the end, and that could have been produced by a GPT, and so we're going to go in worrying that it is, and looking for what are the markers that we might be trying to find, or is something telling us that it likely came from there, instead of concerning ourselves with the learning process and wanting to then assess that the process of learning. If we were able to assess how the student interacted with the different parts of learning as they built it, and if they were using artificial intelligence, for example, and could show their process and show their working throughout, wouldn't that be a great way to be able to give them a richness of marks and awards? Much like, and the easiest way of kind of seeing it is in a maths question. You might do the process, the formula right, and then get something a little bit wrong along the way, and it gives you the wrong answer at the end. You can still get marks for what you did and how you did it, because you were applying things. It's just there was just this error that you made, and actually that's okay, because it was an authentic, safe place that you could make a mistake, fail, learn from it, think, I'm not going to do that again, and move on and apply that learning. And for me, that's a really rich way that I think we might be missing with just always focusing on the product at the end. I'm not saying everyone does. I know people do.
But does it mean, Kevin, that it would be more summative assessments during the semester, or?
Well, I'll be really controversial now and ask the kind of question around, if we're worried about AI being used to create the output, why are we not using AI to help mark the process or mark that end product? And we could concern ourselves much more with how they learn during, not the product at the end. There's a couple of working groups that I've been in to try to look at that, and I know there's some work going on with JISC, I think, at the moment, with 3 different pilots that they're running to look at that type of AI centered assessment process to free up the academic time. So in which case we can have much more richness in that middle bit, because it's also when you can influence more change. When the product is there in front of you, to a certain extent, you've got, is it pass fail? And then what feedback can I give for them to improve down the line with the next module? If you can improve them during the module, that's so much richer, and you're not having to do as much of that of the work on the product at the end. So for me, it's not about the academics needing to do more, it's just doing it in a different place and enabling things like the advancement of technology with AI to help us to then achieve it. And I'd much rather be spending the time with the students in, enhancing it, than sitting there reading X number of essays of thousands of words that then people are worrying has been produced by AI because it's 0 grammar and 0 spelling errors, even though that's what we always ask for.
Yeah, and now I would like to bring in Inka's comment. Thank you, Inka. And Inka was our guest 2 weeks ago and also recommended me Tom, who is now here. So thank you, Inka. And also for your comment, which is about, I do wonder, when thinking about the role of authentic assessment, how might we use authentic assessment to create higher education as the space that is safe to experiment and fail, learn, beyond being a space you can achieve a first? So good question. And Kevin, actually, you already referred a little bit back to it, that all these assessments are about to be the first grade, and you mentioned it, Tom, as well. And then students are coming back to us, always asking, showing us a draft and saying, would I pass with this? Or how can I, it's all about the assessment. And this is when I'm teaching digital marketing, I'm always telling them, actually, when you are doing digital marketing, then you are assessed by the client, right, who is buying or not, and your marks will be money when either they buy it or not. So in a way, I'm trying to say that you're not doing it for this assessment, whatever we are learning, but you're doing it to be a good digital marketer and then actually be able to sell stuff and get the, the money. This is how people vote eventually in life and mark your work. So this is a question, how do we make, and this is a very good question, if we only let them focus on the assessment and succeed, how can they fail? And Kevin gave some very good examples of it, to let them fail during the process. But is there anything else we can do with it if it's all about like getting the first? And then I open it up to any of you to answer, Inka.
Yeah, I think, Kevin, you touched on loads of really interesting points, and I wrote down grade optimization versus learning optimization. And I think we're very much focused on the way we design things, even unintentionally, is to optimize grades because league tables, because of all the things that we know measure us. And so it's a slightly perverse system where we're judged on the grades our students get, but we don't necessarily want them to get certain grades. We want them to learn and learn in certain ways. And so it ends up leading to this tension, I think, sometimes, where we bring students in, we welcome them, we say, you're here to take risks for 3 years to expand your mind, but don't go too far and don't go too fast. You have to do exactly what we say to get the first that you want, that you feel like you're paying for. And so I think, I don't know if there is an answer to the question other than a complete rethink about how we do higher education, which we're not here to do right now. I think
we can still
we can try.
I think
some of the ways that, and Kevin, when you were talking again, some of the ways we try to do it in some of the modules that I teach on and others teach on, we have a group work module in year 1, and part of the assessment is the group assessing themselves. So their final poster has 50% the academic research that they've gone away and done, using kind of campus as a living lab and all of making it real and linked to SDGs and everything else. And the other 50% is them reflecting as a team. How did it go? What went well? What went badly? What would we change? And it's not perfect, but it gets them to be constantly thinking about, are we doing this the right way? And it again, not always perfectly, but it helps students avoid it's group work, I'll let one person do it, because they realize that actually they have to all be involved, particularly because there's a peer review at the end where they score each other and that affects their grades. And so there are ways of doing it, I think. I realize it doesn't answer Inka's question entirely, but putting those spaces in where students have to, Kevin, as you said, not just get the answer at the end, but reflect how they got there. And I really like the analogy you used around maths. You get points for your working out, even if you get the answer wrong. I'm like, we should be focusing on that. That should be the way we teach people. The challenge, I think, that comes with that again, I agree with you on your point about AI. That's a really timely process to do. doing weekly assessments on student reflections, if you've got 150 different students, is a lot. I say that from experience, it's a lot. But actually, and I'm not necessarily advocating AI to do marking, but if that can take some of the pressure off of other admin roles and other things we have to do, so it means I can be in the classroom more and I can be with students more and do more coaching and do more thinking, actually have that time in the middle of the module when module feedback from students says, could we change this and focus there? We try, but I think sometimes we lack in the middle of term. If I said to you, November the 6th, halfway through that first term, very, very difficult to change course if your students are saying, could we actually go here instead? Because we don't have the time. We're teaching on 2 other modules and we've got a review and we've got other things you have to do. So I think my answer to the question would be we need to rethink how we do HE, but failing that, we need to try to think about how can we free up as much time as possible for academic staff and actually professional services staff, because they're a big part of this as well, particularly around that wider student experience. So when we're teaching them about this is how you engage with research and create research posters, how do we also then at the same time show them the opportunities to go and apply that outside the module as well? So they're not just doing it in that module for 10 weeks and then forgetting about it. But yeah, trying to create as much time as possible, whether that's AI, whether it's something else. I think that would be my perhaps answer to Inka's question. Give staff as much time to be with students as they can and actually learn from them, understand lived experiences, and change how they teach accordingly.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to move to the next topic, which will be struggling students. But before that, I'd like to highlight another podcast, Chalk and Talk podcast with Anna Stocky. And Anna is a passionate advocate for evidence-based math education for students of all ages. And on her podcast, she talks about everything from effective teaching methods and how-to guides for teaching math facts to tips for evaluating research shows and claims. She brings on top-notch guests, just like we do, and discusses issues that directly impact teachers and students. So absolutely tune in for Chalk and Talk with Anna Stocky. But now you are listening to Teachers Talk Radio and the Tuesday Twilight show, which we have every second Tuesday from 6 p.m. And today we have 2 amazing guests, Dr. Tom Ritchie and Dr. Kevin Campbell-Karn, and we are focusing on authentic assessments. And we thank you so much for sharing so many golden nuggets. And I'd like to now move to another topic that we really have to talk about when it's about assessments, and honestly, when we talk about anything, and the students who are struggling or have some barriers. They started the semester late or didn't attend or have any other issues like work or family. And with these authentic assessments, we have to see that, like I also saw it in digital marketing and the things that you mentioned, there's group work, there's use of technology, there are some authentic assessments they have to do real life. What do we do with those who couldn't proceed that fast with the others, who had to miss some lessons? So are there any mechanism because with an essay it was always easier, to be fair, to catch up. How do we help them catch up, especially group work, when it can really have an impact on the whole group work? But even if it's individual, we all know that when there's technology, when there's a software, when we involve, like if it's a live brief and we involve the company they have to work together with, it's always harder for someone to catch up as compared to an essay. So do we have any mechanism to help that?
I think I'm probably going to refer back to my comment and also to Tom's. So when you are behind on something, again, there's that lack of confidence. You're in that position of, oh no, they're already further down the road than I am, and I'm now in a position of disadvantage. For some people, that can be the biggest driver of all. Someone like Michael Jordan. I mean, he used to make up stories about other players, pretending that they'd offended him so that he would have to go and beat them. I think that's quite a rare beast that feels that way. A lot of other people will feel, oh no, they're ahead of me. They've already got their advantage. I'm destined to fail, and that kind of negativity speech is then all encompassing. So for me, it comes back to Tom's point there, to help enhance that level of confidence, because I do think it is confidence that they need to enable themselves to move forward. is coaching, and that if they've had that behind point, and as I said earlier on, we're humans and we always want the shortcut. We always want to get from A to B as quickly as possible. They are still going to have to put the time in. This module has, 20 credit module, it's got 200 learning hours, and if you've missed 30 hours of learning because of the X number of weeks that you've not been able to engage with lectures, seminars, tutorials, online, VLE, all sorts of things, then there's no substitute for that time. But what we do need to do is ensure that they are not in a position of, well, I've already failed then, haven't I? Because that's only going to go one way. Those who say I can and those who say I can't are both usually right. So how can you flip them from having that negative position to having a positive one? And they are going to look to us as the academics as being the kind of the kind of the roots that can help them grow in the space that they need to grow in. And so having that accessibility and that time where we can give them those pointers and give them some of those sort of positive coaching practices that enables them to move forwards and then reinforce and see, actually, I am making progress now. I might have started behind, but now, the little nuggets where you say, right, well, go and find out about that company then, and go and find, what's their USP, and what's the one fundamental that they need from that project, so that they've got something. Right now you've got your hook. Now keep going and keep going and keep going. That I think that's really the bit that's most important. And of course that can become missing, again, come back to Tom's point, if the time isn't there, if the time isn't available for the academic staff, the support services, even right through to registry colleagues or whoever who may need to support each of those steps because they enrolled late, or as you say, they had that that family issue and they need to do XYZ process. How do I do that? I don't know. And again, it's just another barrier to their ultimate success. That the smoother we can make that transition, the quicker they can get back on the wagon and be leading their route to success. That's kind of where I see it. I'm interested to see.
It's also coaching. You mentioned, like both of you mentioned coaching. That's interesting then, right, Tom?
Yeah, I think for me, to build on Kevin's point, it's a lot about the relational pedagogy of, if I think about my students, I'd hope, and I look at the feedback that I get given, I'm never Dr. Ritchie, I'm Tom. I'm someone that they can chat to. I try to, for all first year students, when talking to them at different points, I give, as part of the module, we bring academics in each week to talk about failing, to actually show them that academics fail as well, because I sometimes think that academics look terrifying when you're 18. If someone's called Professor whatever, I mean, Professor whatever would be terrifying, but Professor whoever, that can be nerve-wracking for students. And one of the biggest turning points I found was when I did my 15-20 minutes on my journey to here and how failure had been part of that. And I mentioned that I went through clearing, and a bunch of people in the room looked at me in a different way than I think they'd ever looked at me before, because I was showing that vulnerability, and colleagues do as well. When colleagues show that vulnerability, I think people are much more likely to then go to them. If we do away with the academic snobbery of, I'm Dr. whoever and I sit behind my door and that's that because I'm an important researcher, fine. But you're here to teach as well. And so I think we have to really think about that relational pedagogy between staff and students, again, helping them feel like they belong and matter, and building that trust with students. Trust is a key word I think that we need to emphasize more at this point. I think as well, there's options of peer support. So if that student's feeling that, they're not the first student to feel it. So if academics can't be the examples and give the advice, I know we mentioned coaching, but can other students in later years help coach students through that? Because other people probably will have gone through it. I mentioned survivorship bias earlier. One of my biggest bugbears with things like NSS and other tools we use to measure student experience is, to complete NSS, you have to get to the end of your degree. Not all students get to the end of their degree, so we miss all the ones who don't succeed through the system, and we only count those who get through, which is a really weird way of measuring success, and then also a really difficult way to make change. Because if we only listen to the people for whom it worked, how do we know what doesn't work? And I think that's a really key thing I come to. The last thing I'll say, I realize we're close to the end in time, but I think there are alternative modules I've seen through working with kind of small and specialist institutions as well, where they offer the same content a number of times throughout the week, so that it doesn't make it a really high stakes Monday morning, 11 a.m. that if you miss that, you're done for the week. And I think particularly, it may not work in every context, but giving students that flexibility. There is still a debate around lecture capture, which I don't know why it's still happening. Lecture capture enables students to catch up. Yes, it might mean that some skip, but if it allows for others to catch up when they've had to look after a family member or go to their job, then the juice is worth the squeeze. So we need to stop talking about it. It might mean some people stay in bed. Fine, that's their choice. But if it helps people at this end, that's why it's important, I think, for me. And then the last thing I'll say on assessments generally, to kind of bring it back to the theme, is why do we have set assessments anyway? Why don't we build them in the module with the students? And again, this comes back to time, and it's a perfect world, I appreciate. But why don't we build assessments in module linked to learning outcomes with the students based around their capacity, what works, what their skill set is, what works for them, whether they're neurodiverse or not, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if we had that space and time to not just create one way, it's the example of measuring animals' abilities to climb a tree and then saying, well, fish are no good because they can't climb a tree. It's that idea of that's what assessments do a lot of the time. And I think we could, again, in an ideal world where we had more time, maybe have more space on modules to work with students to actually build assessments that are meaningful for them and that they can do meaningfully.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tom. And this is a nice segue to our Kevin. I will give it to you. Sorry, this will be our last topic. Till how we build those assessments involving students, involving colleagues, how we give them opportunities to choose, because this is something that also Kevin mentioned in that talk. How we give them a choice. Okay, so this will be our last topic before we wrap up. Thank you to all our listeners. There are 55 live listeners that couldn't even fit into a classroom, I think. So we're doing very well. Thank you very much. But I'd like to give one more shout out to John Katz bookshop.com, who is bringing this show to you, all of you, in partnership with Teachers Talk Radio. John Katz Educationalist, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning and assessment. And now if you use this code JCTTR2425, then you get 20% off. And with this, I'd like to lead to this last question, just to ask it again. How do we give students more opportunities to choose from the assessment types, and actually how we involve them? I think that was a very good point. Tom, you mentioned a couple of times. It would be good to hear about it, how to do it. So those listeners who are here could really leave with this takeaway, and I will give it to Kevin now.
Yeah, I think so for me, negotiated assessments is quite often a no-brainer, and I've been doing quite a lot of module development over the past few months, working with various colleagues across my university, and I kind of have that open discussion with them and challenge them. So some of them it was modules that already existed, and others I was helping them to create some new modules. And when we were reviewing things like the learning outcomes of existing ones, and I said, do we need to have that sort of phraseology, and could we not make it more like this? Is this not what you're thinking of at the end of the module? And seeing them go, oh yeah, that does make a lot more sense. And then with the assessment, do we really need 4 assessments to be able to test these 3 or 4 different learning outcomes? Or some of them it was 6, 7, or 8, and I trimmed it down. Could we not make that perhaps 1 or maybe only 2 at the most? And does it have to be an essay? But actually, so if they're going to be, I think one of them was around placements. If they're going to be on a placement, do you want them to write an essay, and does it have to have a CV in it? And is that really what? Do they go on a placement to learn about a CV, or do you actually want to see what they've learned? In which case, is it not a bit more reflective? And how do you want them to present that? Do you want that presented in a written report? Does that suit where they're going, or might they need to present it? Might they go into an industry where they would want to do a vlog, or might they want to do some sort of YouTube commentary, or might they want? And you start asking these questions, and they go, oh yeah, could we do that? And you go, yes, of course we can. Bang, negotiated assessment straight in there. And coming back to my point earlier on, it's that confidence, because they're looking at assessments and they've done these assessments before and they seem to work, and they've had positive comments from external examiners. To Tom's point, those ones have got through, and perhaps they've given some NSS grades, and perhaps they've got, X% of first and 2 1s, they're in the sort of 60% of them are achieving a good honours, so they can pat themselves on the back. But let's challenge that a little bit more, and how can we look therefore at what is it that someone really needs to be able to achieve at the end of this, and why can't the student be a co-contributor in the design of how they believe they could best represent themselves in showing you that they've achieved the learning outcomes. They've still got to achieve them, and they've still got to demonstrate them, but let them demonstrate it in a way that best suits them, because I know that that's best for me. Tom said he likes to learn a list, and I can't learn a list. I just can't do it. But I can take things apart and put them back together without an instruction manual, no problem at all. And so, that's the differences. But that's a set of differences between us. Isn't that what human beings are all about? We don't need the 50 odd people that you said here all to be assessed in exactly the same way. Let's enrich it by enabling them to show their outcomes of learning in a way that best suits them, and that therefore will best suit them in the environment that they go on to work in, because different people will go and achieve things in different spaces regardless of what their grade is. And I, again, I applaud you, Tom, on your point about, being open and honest and how you get through. I completely agree. And when you say to a student, I failed something once before, and they go, did you? And you go, yes. And I'm teaching you that module now. Do you think I did a bad job? It's sort of, they go, oh, wow, maybe they are a human being, and maybe failure is not such a bad thing, coming back to Inka's point. So for me, it is, kind of, set yourselves free and gain that confidence to review and change things. And that's probably the biggest question I try to ask academic staff is, what change could you make now? And they might say, it's just too late in the cycle to change the module learning outcomes or the specific module assessment as it is validated on the module spec. Okay, fine. So put that to one side and set that as a goal you want to achieve. But have you written your assessment brief? No. Okay, great. So what does the module say, and what flexibility is written in how that's been written? How can you push the boundaries of what's there to try to move towards being more authentic and more student involved, so that it isn't just, does it say that there must only be one essay question, or could they have varieties of questions or variety of scenarios? That probably isn't written into the module spec. So go beyond that and enhance your assessment brief.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, again, I feel like it's just me saying I agree with Kevin, but I agree with Kevin on a lot of that. And I think as you were talking on that final point, I was reflecting on module approval processes, and even how that doesn't sit at the right time. It comes right as we're marking exams, right in the middle of May, when students themselves don't have time for me to do focus groups with them to say, actually, if you could do that again, what would we change? And then again, teaching on an AI module is great fun, because if you set your module in May, by October, when you come to teach it, the AI tools that you're talking about look nothing like they did in May when you wrote it, because they have completely changed. They have changed so fundamentally in what they can do, their abilities, that you end up almost having to hold students back sometimes in that. I think for me, if I think about your point about working with industry as well, the module I teach in year 3 called Innovation, the assessments are analogs of things from recruitment processes. So students have to create a 3-minute video. Well, that's an interview answer. They have to create a portfolio based on a project, which they can then take to interview. They have to do a reflection piece, and they have to do a thought leadership blog. And the idea behind all of this is it's getting them to begin to test these skill sets. And that's a very simple way of getting students perhaps to do assessments that can help prepare them for what's coming next, without making it obvious, without going, this is going to help you when you finish, but actually helping them prepare for those kind of real professional contexts. I think the challenges we we have are that how do we, I think for me, well, there's a number of things. I think I really like the point about the different, do we have to, or a different way of saying that, can we think about how we do assessment briefs for students? I think if I reflect back on learning outcomes that we give students in module outlines and assessment briefs, so many that I read as someone who works in the system, I don't understand what they're saying. So I always wonder how students can understand what they're saying. What's the difference between something being excellent work and good work? I know what those two words mean, but I don't know in sentences that I'm reading what elevates this between the two. And I think that is a real challenge when we come to marking. And so therefore it's a challenge for students then, because how do they understand where they need to thread that line, I think, as well. It's a real challenge. And I think, how do we make sure that it's not just a free-for-all if we're offering these different ways of assessment? And for me, it's about scaffolding the student experience, which comes back to everything I was saying about relational pedagogy and that sense of belonging and building trust, so that it's not, again, I'm not the sage on the stage that they're watching. I'm someone who they know, who they can come to. I don't have office hours because I don't want students to only feel like they can come in that 1 hour. Do you know what I mean? It's a way of trying to work with students as partners in their education rather than me giving them their education. So doing things with students rather than almost doing education to students, which I sometimes think is how students can feel like they're treated.
Oh, fantastic closing sentence, I think. Doing education with students and not education to them, right? It's fantastic. Thank you so much to both of you. I think we could go on and on about this subject, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk. Thank you so much for your generosity to come on the show and sharing these amazing thoughts and insights. We eventually went even above 60 of our listeners, so I really hope that everybody enjoyed it, and obviously many of the listeners will watch the recording, so I'm also would like to welcome them. So thank you so much to the two of you. And at the end of the session, I just would like to show again the website ttiradio.org/newsletter, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, which is sent every week to 15,000 educators. And please also subscribe to or follow us on social media. So with this, I'd like to finish this Tuesday Twilight Show. Thank you so much to Dr. Kevin Campbell-Karn and Dr. Tom Ritchie, who is Tom and Kevin, and today they really showed how approachable they are. Thank you so much to the both of you, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused